The former book, O Theophilus. This is podcast number 108. It's a study of the first paragraph of Luke and requires no knowledge of Accordance Bible software or Hebrew or Greek. From time to time, all of us encounter passages in the Bible that are puzzling or even seem to challenge our own personal convictions. I know it's tempting to just skip them and move on, but there is a better path, a much better path. That's to investigate the passage using proper research methods. That's what this podcast is all about, quality research design. Today, we'll be using the first paragraph of Luke as an example. Research design in its simplest form means developing a working hypothesis. To test it, we conduct research. Now, in the hard sciences, this might be a set of experiments. As a result of this investigation, we might prove the hypothesis. We might also disprove it. In either of these cases, the research is done, though we still might want to write up the results for publication. There is a third possibility, though, and that is that we find the working hypothesis needs modified. In that case, we return to it and adjust it, then test the new and improved version. If all this sounds a little rarefied, consider the popular TV show Mythbusters. If you're already a fan, you're probably used to seeing things like this. Here's the Mythbusters version of research design. Take an urban myth, blow something up, preferably several times. The myth is judged either confirmed, plausible, or busted. While we're not going to blow anything up today, I do trust this podcast will add explosive power to your own research. Here's the passage under consideration today, Acts 1, 1 through 5. It begins, "The first account I composed, Theophilus, about all that Jesus began to do and teach, until the day when he was taken up to heaven, after he had, by the Holy Spirit, given orders to the apostles whom he had chosen." The first account undoubtedly refers to the Gospel of Luke, the first part of his two-part series of the beginning of Christianity. What is curious is that Luke says it only covers what Jesus began to do and teach, even though the Gospel covers the entire earthly ministry of Jesus through his ascension. One possible solution to this puzzle is Luke's emphasis in this paragraph on the Holy Spirit, whom some believe is the key figure that links the two books. Here are my observations based on the passage we just read. First, Jesus' earthly ministry of doing and teaching, recorded in Luke, was only the beginning. Second, the implication is that this ministry is ongoing, even though Jesus himself has ascended. Third, the question is, how can Jesus continue this ministry if he's not on earth? And finally, the author's emphasis on the Holy Spirit in this context seems to imply that the solution to this puzzle lies in a proper understanding of the Spirit's work. Let's consider this a bit further. The common understanding of Christians today is that Jesus ministered directly while he was on earth. After his ascension, he ministers through his agent, the church. If we display that understanding graphically, it looks something like this, and then like this. The second possibility is somewhat different. The Holy Spirit is the one who works on earth. When Jesus was here, the Holy Spirit empowered him. After he ascended, the Holy Spirit empowered the church. The difference here is the emphasis on the Spirit as the one whose ministry is ongoing. Graphically, this possibility looks like this, and like this. Though I've heard the second explanation, I've never actually investigated it myself. That's what we're going to do in this podcast. If we test this hypothesis, we'll need to do some research. In my mind, that means asking three questions. The first two are about Luke. Does Luke stress the Spirit's role in Jesus' earthly ministry? And, if so, does it do so more than the other Gospels, especially the Synoptics? The third question concerns Acts. Again, if so, does this same emphasis on the Spirit's role continue in Acts? Since the first two questions are about Luke, let's divide our research into two parts, beginning with an investigation into Luke's portrayal of Jesus' earthly ministry. We have two questions, both of which need answered. We'll have to conduct some investigations in order to answer them. Since the first concerns the Spirit's activity, we probably ought to use accordance to conduct a word search of Spirit and a statistical analysis of that word's occurrence. The second part will also be helpful for the next question, as it requires a comparison. It uses the phrase more than. Fortunately, we have several gospel accounts. We can compare their content. First, that of parallel passages, and secondly, that of Luke's unique material, to see if it stresses the Spirit's work. The first step we'll take is to search for the word Spirit. Since we're only interested when it appears as a proper name, let's place an equal sign in front of the word and capitalize the S. That way Accordance knows to find the word only when it's capitalized. We're also only really interested in the Gospel and Acts, so let's add a range as a search condition. I've already added the custom range, so all we have to do is select it here. This will limit the hits graph to just this text range, making it easier to analyze. We'll also make the search option exact, so the search will exclude any plurals. We'll run our search, and we found 102 verses with 107 exact hits. We're going to highlight these hits to make it easier to identify them. Pressing the Shift key before selecting Highlight will highlight every hit in the front window. Let's mark all the Spirit occurrences with both a dove symbol and a green highlight. Okay, now let's analyze those hits. First, we'll take a look at the hits graph for our search. It will give us a good visual impression of our results. Since we're comparing books, it would probably help if we made the graph a bit coarser, like so. Here's how this hits graph appears once adjusted a bit. Since this is a podcast, I thought it would be a bit easier to see if I placed it in a slide rather than in a Word document. I realize the lines dividing these four books are a bit light, so here's a bit of help. When interpreting this chart, remember that these three Gospels are the synoptics, while these are the two books written by Luke. The fourth Gospel, which most scholars believe was written last, usually separates the two in modern Bible translations. The accordance table displays the results numerically. I think our best bet is to sort by total number of hits, but add total verses and total words to the display. That way we can get an impression of just how big each book actually is. Sometimes it's easier to process numbers, so here's the table of the hits. I ran some calculations of my own and added this column. If Mark was written first, followed by Matthew, Luke, and then John, which is the current general scholarly consensus, a chronological rearrangement of this chart looks something like this. There's an interesting observation to be made here. The emphasis on the Spirit in Jesus' ministry increases over time. Both of these analytical tools help us answer the first question. Does Luke stress the Spirit's role in Jesus' earthly ministry? The answer is certainly yes. How about the second question, though? Does Luke stress the activity of the Holy Spirit more than the other Gospels? The overall statistical analysis suggests that it's plausible, but let's take a closer look, just to make sure. Accordance's parallels is the perfect tool for comparing the Gospels. It's easy to use, too. First, let's shrink the size of the font in our text and add some context. That makes it easier to use parallels, since it compares passages by pericope, or story, rather than verse by verse. All we have to do is to select the verse reference containing Spirit and amplify it to parallels. Accordance then automatically searches the database to identify the correct pericope and display it. First, we'll select Luke 1:13 and amplify it to the Gospel's parallel. It's part of Pericope 2, the announcement of the birth of John the Baptist. It's found only in Luke. See how the highlighting makes it easy to spot the word Spirit? Next up is Luke 1:33, the Annunciation, another pericope unique to Luke. Luke 1:39, Mary's visit to Elizabeth, is likewise unique. Luke 1:67, unique. Now remember, all this material is not only unique to Luke, but also stresses the activity of the Spirit. Let's find a couple passages with parallels. We'll skip a couple of verse references here and go to Luke 3:16. John's messianic ministry. It appears in all three synoptics and John, but only the synoptics mention the Spirit. And finally, Luke 3:22, the baptism of Jesus, which is found in all four Gospels. While we usually form subjective impressions as we research, it's often helpful to have some sort of objective measure as well. Here's a table I designed to record our research results. Each time we amplify a passage from Luke to parallels, we'll record the verse reference, the pericope number, whether it is present in any of the other Gospels or not, and, if so, whether they mention the Spirit in that passage. Notice I've left room for comments on this chart. I've also filled out the first three instances, as well as pericopes 16 and 18. Now, we won't have time to complete this research or this chart during the podcast, but feel free to do so on your own. After testing our working hypothesis, I've concluded that the evidence does support it. Luke presents both Jesus' ministry and the ministry of the church as a result of the activity of the Holy Spirit. You'll have to decide for yourself whether you found this evidence equally compelling. In either case, I trust you've benefited by seeing how proper research is designed and how to use accordance to answer these sorts of questions. This has been Dr. J for Accordance Bible Software. Thank you for watching this episode of Lighting the Lamp.